It was early morning when the sound of pine trees brushing against each other woke me up in my small wooden cabin, nestled deep in the forest at the edge of Clearwater County. This cabin wasn't just some weekend getaway for me. It was my sanctuary, my fortress, and the last piece of my late grandfather's legacy. For generations, my family had owned this land, thousands of acres stretching across hills, rivers, and valleys. Most people didn't even know where our property lines ended because they ran so far beyond what the eye could see. I'd grown up here, learned to fish in the creek that ran behind the cabin, and hunted in the woods long before smartphones and Wi-Fi took over people's lives. So when some HOA busybody named Karen showed up at my front door demanding I vacate the property immediately because I was violating community regulations, I almost laughed in her face. Almost. At first, I thought it was some kind of joke. Maybe she had the wrong address, or maybe she'd gotten lost and stumbled onto my land by mistake. After all, the nearest paved road was 10 miles away, and the only signs out here were the ones I'd nailed to trees saying, "Private property," and "No trespassing." But no, Karen wasn't lost, and she sure as hell wasn't joking. She came marching up my gravel driveway like she owned the place, her little clipboard tucked under one arm, and a cheap knockoff designer bag slung over her shoulder. Behind her, a silver SUV with HOA stickers on the rear window was parked like it belonged here. "Excuse me, sir," she said in a voice that could cut glass, "but you're not authorized to reside on this property. This cabin is located within Clearwater Lakes Estates, and all properties within this community are subject to HOA rules and regulations. You cannot live here full-time." I stared at her for a long moment, trying to process the level of stupidity I was dealing with. Clearwater Lakes Estates? HOA rules? This land wasn't part of any damn community. It was my land, my family's land, for more than 100 years. Hell, I could probably count on one hand the number of people who'd ever set foot out here, and most of them had been invited. Yet here she was, acting like she had some authority over me. "Lady," I said, my voice low and calm, "you're standing on private property. This isn't part of your HOA. Never has been, never will be. So I suggest you turn around, get back in your SUV, and drive that pretty little clipboard of yours right back where you came from." Karen's lips tightened like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Sir, you are mistaken. This entire area falls under Clearwater Lakes Estate's jurisdiction, and according to Section 4, Article 7 of our community bylaws, you are prohibited from establishing permanent residence without HOA approval. Failure to comply will result in immediate action, including fines, property seizure, and, if necessary, involvement of law enforcement." That was when I laughed. I didn't just chuckle. I threw my head back and laughed so hard I had tears in my eyes. This woman really thought her little HOA had the power to seize my land? Land that my family had owned since before her grandparents were even born? Oh, this was going to be fun. I walked closer, my boots crunching on the gravel, until I was standing just a few feet away from her. She looked up at me with that smug superiority I've seen 1,000 times before. City folks who think they can come out to country and push people around because they've got a rule book and a fake sense of authority. "Karen, right?" I asked, reading the name tag pinned to her floral blouse. "Listen to me carefully. This land, every tree, every rock, every blade of grass, is mine. It's been in my family for over a century. Clearwater Lakes Estates doesn't own a damn inch of it. So unless you got a deed with my name on it, I suggest you leave before you really piss me off." Her eyes narrowed. "Sir, if you refuse to comply, I'll have no choice but to escalate this matter. The law is on our side." I leaned in close so she could see the steel in my eyes. "Lady, the law is on my side. You have no jurisdiction here. None. And if you don't leave in the next 30 seconds, you're trespassing, and I'll have the sheriff escort you out. Got it?" Karen didn't back down, which honestly surprised me. Most people fold when they realize they're outmatched, but this one, she had that stubborn, entitled streak that makes HOA presidents think they're God's gift to the neighborhood. She stood there, chin up, lips pursed, acting like she had the upper hand. Then, without another word, she whipped out her phone and started dialing. "You've left me no choice," she said coldly. "I'm calling 911. I shook my head, almost feeling sorry for her. Almost. She had no idea who she was messing with. No idea that the man she was trying to evict didn't just own this cabin. He owned the entire damn county. The look on Karen's face as she pressed that phone to her ear was priceless. She stood there, her little manicured finger trembling as she dialed, probably expecting me to start begging or explaining myself the moment she said the words police or law enforcement. But instead of panic, I just leaned back against the porch railing, arms crossed, watching her like she was the evening entertainment. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that people like her thrive on control. Take away their illusion of power, and they unravel like cheap yarn. "Hello, yes," she said into the phone, her voice dripping with self-importance. "This is Karen Whitley, president of the Clearwater Lakes Estates Homeowners Association. I'm here at an unauthorized dwelling within our jurisdiction, and the occupant is refusing to leave." Yes, that's correct. He's being aggressive and threatening." She shot me a smug look at that last part, as if lying to the dispatcher would somehow make me sweat. "Please send an officer immediately." "Thank you." She hung up and smiled at me like she just checkmated me in some grand game of life. "They're on their way," she announced, her voice loud and triumphant, like she was delivering a death sentence. I couldn't help but grin. "Great," I said. "I'll make some coffee." Her brow furrowed, clearly not expecting me to stay calm. "You don't seem to understand the gravity of the situation," she said, tucking the phone back into her purse. "You're going to be removed from this property today." "Oh, I understand just fine," I replied. "But what you don't understand is that you just called the sheriff on the guy who signs his paycheck." Her eyes blinked rapidly, like her brain was buffering. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said, stepping off the porch and walking slowly toward her. Not threatening, just closing the gap enough so she could see I wasn't bluffing. "This isn't Clearwater Lakes Estates, Karen. This isn't even in your tax district. This," I swept my arm toward the mountains behind me, "is Clearwater County land. And guess who owns Clearwater County?" She let out a little laugh, the kind of laugh people do when they think you're joking but aren't quite sure. "That's ridiculous. No one owns the entire county." "Check the records," I said. "Go down to the courthouse. Pull the land deeds. You'll find my name, Jack Sullivan, on every single one of them." Her confidence cracked, just a little. I could see it in her eyes. "But people like Karen don't fold easily." She doubled down, clinging to that HOA handbook like it was the Bible. "Even if that were true, which it's not, you can't just live out here without following regulations. We have rules for a reason." "Karen," I said with a smirk, "the only rules out here are the ones I make." Before she could respond, I heard the distant hum of tires crunching on gravel. Sure enough, a few minutes later, a sheriff's SUV rolled up the drive, kicking up dust as it came to a stop behind Karen's silver monstrosity. Out stepped Sheriff Hayes, a tall, broad man in his late 50s with a mustache that could put most broomsticks to shame. I'd known Hayes since I was a kid. Hell, he used to hunt deer with my dad. When he saw me leaning on the porch railing, his whole face lit up. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, walking up with that slow, easy stride of his. "Jack Sullivan. Haven't seen you in a coon's age." "Good to see you too, Sheriff," I said, grinning. "How's the wife?" She's good," he said, shaking my hand firmly before turning to Karen. "Now, what seems to be the problem here?" Karen jumped in like a jackrabbit. "Officer, Sheriff, thank you for coming. This man is illegally occupying property within Clearwater Lakes Estates. He's refused to leave despite multiple warnings. I'm the HOA president, and I demand that he be removed immediately." Sheriff Hayes looked at her, then at me, then back at her, and then he laughed. Not a chuckle, not a polite laugh, a full-on belly laugh that echoed through the trees. Karen's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. "Ma'am," Hayes said, still grinning, "do you know who you're talking to?" "Yes," she snapped. "A trespasser." "Wrong," Hayes said, his voice firm now. "You're talking to the man who owns more land in this county than anyone else. Hell, I bet Jack here owns the ground you're standing on." "I what?" Karen stammered, blinking like a deer in headlights. "That's right," Hayes said. Jack Sullivan's family has owned Clearwater County since before my granddaddy was born. If you want to build a skyscraper out here, there ain't a damn thing anyone could do about it. Karen's jaw dropped. But the HOA, the bylaws... Hayes shook his head. Lady, your HOA don't mean squat out here. This isn't your jurisdiction. In fact, I'd say you're trespassing right now. I smiled, enjoying every second of it. You heard the man, Karen. You're the one breaking the law. Her face went pale, and for a moment, I thought she might actually faint. But then, in true HOA fashion, she regrouped, her voice rising like a tea kettle on the verge of boiling. This isn't over, she hissed. I will take this to the county board. I will take this to the state. You can't just own everything. I tilted my head and grinned. Watch me. Hayes gave me a look that said he'd handle it from here, but I waved him off. It's fine, Sheriff. Karen here can leave on her own. I'm sure she has a board meeting to attend. Karen glared at me one last time, her eyes burning with a mix of rage and humiliation, before storming back to her SUV. She slammed the door so hard it rattled the windows, then peeled out my driveway like a bat out of hell. I watched her go, wondering just how far she'd take this. Because something told me this wasn't the last I'd see of Karen Whitley. People like her, they don't quit. They escalate. And I had a feeling the next time she showed up, she wouldn't be alone. I figured Karen would lick her wounds and crawl back to whatever HOA nest she came from, but I underestimated her persistence. People like Karen don't just let things go. They turn it into a crusade. So when 2 days passed without a peep, I knew something big was brewing. Out here in the woods, silence is never just silence. It's the calm before the storm. That morning, I was out splitting logs behind the cabin, sweat rolling down my back, when I heard engines in the distance. Not one engine, several. The low, throaty rumble of multiple vehicles grinding their way up my long dirt road. I set the axe down, wiped my brow, and listened. It didn't sound like law enforcement. They usually come in twos, not convoys. No, this was something else. Something organized. By the time the first vehicle rounded the bend, I already had a good idea of what was happening. A shiny black SUV led the pack, followed by 2 pickups and another SUV bringing up the rear. They rolled up my drive like they were invading Normandy. Doors swung open and out stepped Karen, dressed in an even brighter floral blouse than before, her face twisted into a smug little smile that made my knuckles itch. Behind her were 5 men in matching polo shirts with the Clearwater Lakes Estates logo stitched on the chest. They looked like the kind of guys who'd never swung a hammer in their lives, but thought a firm handshake made them tough. Well, I said, stepping off the porch, my boots crunching on gravel. Karen brought friends. What is this, a welcome party? Her smile widened like a snake about to strike. Mr. Sullivan, she said sweetly, we've given you every opportunity to comply voluntarily. Since you refused, we are now taking enforcement action. I raised an eyebrow. Enforcement action? That's right, she said. Under HOA bylaws, we have the authority to remove unauthorized structures, and this, she gestured to my cabin, is an unauthorized structure. I stared at her for a long second, then laughed so hard I nearly doubled over. You're going to tear down my cabin? I said between chuckles. On my land? Yes, she said firmly. We brought a contractor and everything. I looked past her and saw one of the pickup trucks had a trailer hitched to it loaded with tools. Not heavy machinery, just chainsaws, sledgehammers, and a bunch of stuff that looked like it belonged at a backyard shed project, not a demolition site. Still, the intent was clear. Karen wasn't bluffing. She really thought she could come out here and bully me into submission. You know, I said, shaking my head, I admire your commitment. Really, most people would have given up after the sheriff laughed in their face. But not you, Karen. You're a fighter. This isn't a fight, she snapped. This is compliance. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. Karen, let me explain something. You've crossed the line from annoying to dangerous. You're trespassing. You're attempting to destroy private property. That's not just a civil matter. It's a felony. You keep pushing, And the next person you talk to isn't going to be me or the sheriff. It's going to be a judge. For a split second, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. But then one of her goons, some guy with a buzz cut and an ego the size of Texas, decided to puff his chest out. "You heard the lady," he said, stepping forward. "You got 5 minutes to pack your crap and get out, or we start tearing this place down." I turned to him slowly, my grin widening. "Is that so?" "That's so," he said, folding his arms like he thought that made him look intimidating. I nodded slowly, then whistled, a sharp, piercing sound that echoed through the trees. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, from the woods behind the cabin, came the sound of paws pounding the earth. Seconds later, my dogs appeared, 2 massive German shepherds and a Rottweiler named Bear. They came barreling out of the trees like furry missiles, teeth bared, growls rumbling like distant thunder. They skidded to a stop in front of me, eyes locked on the intruders. Buzz Cut's face went pale. Karen stumbled back a step, clutching her clipboard like it was a shield. "See, call them off." I crouched down, scratching Bear behind the ears. "Relax," I said. "They're friendly, unless someone tries to touch what's mine." Karen swallowed hard, her bravado cracking. This is intimidation." "No," I said, standing tall again. "This is me being nice. You don't want to see me stop being nice." For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Then Karen hissed something under her breath and signaled for her crew to back off. They muttered among themselves, clearly not eager to test 3 sets of teeth. One by one, they retreated to their vehicles, but not before Karen turned back to me, her eyes burning with hatred. "You think this scares me?" she spat. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." I smiled. "Neither do you." She slammed her SUV door and tore out of there, her little convoy following close behind. I watched them go, my dogs at my side, and let out a slow breath. This was getting out of hand. HOA disputes were one thing. Organized attempts to demolish my home? That was war. And if Karen wanted a war, she'd picked the wrong damn county. I knew Karen wasn't done. People like her never stop until they either win or crash and burn spectacularly. And if I had to guess, she wasn't the type to crash quietly. After that little stunt with her demolition crew, I figured she'd go back to her HOA headquarters and cook up something even more dramatic. What I didn't expect was how far she'd go, or how quickly she'd make her next move. 2 nights later, I was sitting on the porch with a cold beer in my hand, watching the sun dip behind the pines, when the rumble of engines came again. Only this time, it wasn't a handful of trucks. It was a damn army. Headlights cut through the trees like a swarm of angry fireflies, and the sound of heavy tires grinding against gravel sent a warning bell clanging in my head. I set the bottle down and reached for the Remington leaning against the wall. By the time the first vehicle rolled into the clearing, the sun was gone, and the only light came from my porch lantern and the glow of headlights bouncing off the trees. And what a sight it was. Karen had outdone herself. This wasn't just a convoy. It was a full-blown show of force. There were SUVs, trucks, even a flatbed trailer, carrying what looked like a skid-steer loader. At the front of it all, in a gleaming black Escalade, was Karen, draped in some kind of designer jacket, her blonde hair shining under the beams like a damn crown. The Escalade rolled to a stop, and Karen stepped out with the grace of someone who thought she was about to win an Oscar. Behind her came more of her goons, at least 10 this time, all wearing matching polo shirts again, like they were a militia of middle-aged dads who traded beer belly for bravado. But what really caught my eye were the uniforms. Not sheriff's deputies. No, these guys were private security. Big, burly men with tactical vests, radios clipped to their shoulders, and holsters on their hips. Well, damn, I muttered under my breath. She brought an army. Karen strutted toward me like a peacock in heat, heels clicking against the gravel, clipboard in hand as always. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "We're done playing games. You've left us no choice but to escalate this matter." I leaned against the porch post, the Remington resting casually across my arms. "Escalate," I repeated. "That's a fancy word for you just made the dumbest mistake of your life." She smiled like a cat about to eat a canary. This time we're prepared. This property falls under Clearwater Lakes Estate's jurisdiction, and we have the legal authority to enforce our bylaws, including the removal of unauthorized structures. I laughed, slow and deep. Karen, you really don't get it, do you? Oh, I get it, she snapped. You think you're untouchable. You think owning a little land makes you special. A little land? I said, pushing off the post and walking down the steps. The crunch of my boots on the gravel was the only sound for a moment, and I made sure every eye was on me. Karen, I don't just own a little land. I own this land. All of it. Every square inch of Clearwater County belongs to me. Your HOA? It doesn't exist here. Your rules? Worth less than the paper they're printed on. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. You can say whatever you want, but the law. The law. I cut her off with a grin. Sweetheart, I'm the law out here. The sheriff works for me. The county board works for me. Hell, the taxes you pay? They go straight into my pocket. You think bringing a bunch of rent-a-cops is going to change that? One of her security guys shifted his weight, his hand resting near his holster. Big mistake. My dogs noticed immediately. Bear let out a low, rumbling growl that made the night air vibrate. The shepherds followed suit, hackles rising, teeth glinting in the lantern light. Call them off, Karen said sharply, her voice cracking just a little this time. Relax, I said. They're friendly, unless someone does something stupid, like reaching for a gun on my property. The guy froze, his hand sliding away from the holster. Smart move. Karen took a deep breath, regaining her composure. This isn't going away, Mr. Sullivan. You can posture all you want, but I've already filed injunctions with the state. I've contacted the county zoning board, and... Let me stop you right there, I said, holding up a hand. The county zoning board? You mean the one where I personally appointed every member? Or the state injunction that's going to end up on the desk of a judge who happens to owe me a favor? Her face twitched. Just a little, but I saw it. The realization was starting to sink in. She was out of her league, and she knew it. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. You don't get it, Karen. This isn't some HOA power trip. This is my world. You're just visiting. For a long moment, she didn't say a word. Then she spun on her heel and marched back to the Escalade, barking orders at her men. They started packing up, muttering under their breath. And within minutes, the whole convoy was backing out of my clearing, engines growling in defeat. But before she climbed into her SUV, Karen turned and gave me a look I'll never forget. A mix of rage, humiliation, and pure, unfiltered hate. This isn't over, she said. I smiled. You're damn right it's not. And as I stood there watching her disappear into the night, I realized something important. She wasn't just stubborn. She was dangerous. And if I didn't end this soon, she was going to make me do something I'd regret. The quiet after Karen left that night was heavier than the summer heat hanging in the air. My gut told me this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen wasn't the type to lick her wounds and quit. No, people like her don't back down. They double down. And when they run out of options, they burn the whole damn house down trying to win. I had a feeling she'd come back. And next time, it wouldn't just be with a convoy of polo-wearing weekend warriors and a skid steer. I was right. 3 days later, I woke up to the sound of rotors thumping overhead. At first, I thought I was dreaming, the low, rhythmic whump-whump-whump of a helicopter slicing through the morning sky didn't belong out here in the middle of nowhere. I stumbled out onto the porch, blinking against the early sun, and there it was, a sleek black chopper hovering over my clearing like some damn dragonfly from hell. And it wasn't alone. Down the driveway, I saw flashing lights, blue and red strobes bouncing off the pines. Karen had gone nuclear. I grabbed the binoculars hanging on a nail by the door and scanned the tree line. Sure enough, a line of state trooper cruisers snaked its way up the gravel road, followed by a big white box truck with Clearwater County Property Enforcement plastered on the side in bold black letters. Behind that, news vans. 3 of them. Their satellite dishes gleamed like silver spears in the morning sun. I let out a slow whistle. Well, damn, Karen, I muttered. You really brought the circus this time. By the time the first trooper stepped out, I was already sitting on the porch with a mug of coffee, dogs at my feet, calm as a man could be. Because here's the thing about owning everything. You don't panic when people come for you. You let them play their game. And then you flip the board. The troopers fanned out, hands resting on their belts, eyes scanning the place like they expected to find a meth lab instead of a log cabin. Behind them came Karen, dressed like she was running for governor, hair perfect, lipstick screaming confidence. And beside her walked a man in a suit, thin, gray-haired, with that stiff-backed arrogance that only comes from years of thinking you're the smartest guy in the room. A lawyer. Of course. Mr. Sullivan. Karen called out, her voice carrying across the clearing like a battle cry. This is your final warning. You are in violation of state housing and zoning laws, and you are hereby ordered to vacate these premises immediately. I sipped my coffee. Morning, Karen. Nice day for a power trip. Her face twitched, but she powered through. This property is condemned by order of the Clearwater County Compliance Office. She waved a paper in the air like it was the Holy Grail. We have a demolition crew on standby and state law enforcement here to enforce compliance. Behind her, one of the news crews fired up a camera. I could see the reporter practicing her serious face, probably thinking this was going to be the lead story on the 6 o'clock news. Local man defies HOA. Faces justice. Cute. I set the mug down and stood, stretching slow like I had all the time in the world. Karen, I said, my voice steady. You've outdone yourself. Really. Helicopters, troopers, news crews. You went all in. But before you embarrass yourself on live TV, there's something you need to see. She crossed her arms, chin high. The only thing I'm going to see is you being escorted off this property in handcuffs. I smiled and reached into my back pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. Not just any paper. The deed. The original, notarized, ironclad deed to Clearwater County, signed by my great-grandfather over a century ago and reaffirmed every generation since. I held it up for the cameras to catch. This, I said, unfolding it slowly, is why you're about to look like the biggest fool in state history. Karen laughed. A sharp, brittle sound. A piece of paper? You think that means anything? I grinned wider. Not just any paper. Sweetheart, this is the master deed. It says in no uncertain terms that the entirety of Clearwater County, every square mile, is private land, owned by me, which means the county can't enforce squat out here. And the state? They need to buy from me first. Good luck with that. The lawyer stepped forward, squinting at the document. That's impossible. Is it? I said, why don't you check the registrar's office? Or better yet, I pulled out my phone and hit a button. Within seconds, the flatbed truck I'd parked down the road rolled into view. On it sat a massive metal sign, covered with a tarp. Two of my ranch hands jumped down, yanked the tarp free, and there it was, Welcome to Sullivan County, private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. The cameras zoomed in. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's face drained of color. See, Karen, I said, stepping down the porch steps. This isn't just a cabin. This isn't just land. This is my kingdom. You thought you could take it with bylaws and bulldozers? Honey, you couldn't take it if you brought the National Guard. The lawyer muttered something into his phone. The troopers exchanged uneasy glances. Even the chopper pilot sounded nervous as he buzzed overhead, probably wondering if he'd sign up to break federal law. Karen just stood there, trembling, her fingers tightening around that clipboard like it was the last piece of her soul. This isn't fair, she whispered. I tilted my head, smiling cold. Fair? You tried to steal what wasn't yours. You lied to the cops. You trespassed. You threatened me. And now the whole damn state knows it. I gestured to the cameras. Congratulations, Karen. You're famous. She looked around, eyes darting to the news crew, to the troopers, to her own private security. And then something in her broke. The fight drained out of her like water down a drain. She dropped the clipboard, turned, and walked away. No words. No threats. Just gone. The troopers packed up. The lawyer vanished. The news crew stuck around for interviews. I gave him a good one, smiling the whole time. Let the world know the truth. Some battles aren't won in court or by force. Some battles are won before they even start, because the ground you're standing on already belongs to you. That night, I sat on the porch with another beer, dogs at my feet, watching the stars burn holes in the sky. I thought about Karen, about how close she came to wrecking everything. And then I thought about the lesson in all this. People like her, they think power comes from titles and rules and little pieces of paper. But real power is owning the ground beneath their feet. And out here in my county, that power will always be mine.